Li Huan stared out the viewport of his small ship as it approached Telluria. The alien planet's 3 moons hung like silver coins against the purple-blue atmosphere. After 5 years away, he'd never expected to return, especially not for such a sad occasion. His communication device buzzed. A message from the Tellurian High Council confirmed his landing coordinates and reiterated condolences for Ambassador Kang Da's passing. Li closed his eyes. 20 years of friendship ended with a simple message 3 days ago. The great ambassador has joined the eternal stars. Tellurian poetry, for he's dead. The ship's computer announced landing procedures. Li straightened his formal diplomatic uniform. Retired or not, he would honor his friend properly. The spaceport gleamed with the signature blue-silver metal the Tellurians favored. Waiting for him was Mun, Kang's longtime assistant, tall and slender like all Tellurians, with silvery skin that caught the light. "Captain Li," Mun said, bowing in the human style. "Ambassador Kang spoke of you often. I regret we meet in such circumstances." "Thank you for arranging my visit so quickly," Li replied. "I still can't believe he's gone." "The ambassador's passing was unexpected for all," Mun said, leading Li to a waiting transport. "The ceremony begins at moonrise." Li noticed the glances from other Tellurians as they passed, some curious, others seemingly disapproving. Though relations had improved during Kang's tenure, humans remained uncommon visitors to the Tellurian homeworld. Many are surprised to see a human attending a high family ceremony. Mun explained, noticing Li's observation. Ambassador Kang broke many traditions. That he did, Li smiled sadly. It's what made him special. The transport glided through the capital city. Tall, crystalline structures reflected the setting sun in bursts of color. Li remembered his first visit here with Kang, how the ambassador had laughed at Li's awestruck expression. "You humans are so expressive," Kang had said. "Your faces show everything you feel. It's refreshing." The transport stopped before a vast building with spiraling towers. The House of Kang, one of the oldest Tellurian families, and now without its patriarch. Inside, the great hall was filled with Tellurians in ceremonial attire. Their normally subdued demeanor was even more solemn today. Many wore the platinum bands that signified mourning. Li was led to a seat near the front, a position of honor that caused more whispers among the assembled guests. As the only human present, he stood out sharply against the tall, silver-skinned Tellurians. The funeral ceremony began as the first moon rose. It was beautiful in its alien way. Songs in the complex Tellurian language that human vocal cords could never reproduce. The scattering of crystalline dust that hung in the air like stars. The recitation of Kang's lineage going back thousands of years. Li noticed 3 female Tellurians seated in the position of closest family. Though he had met Kang's daughters years ago, they had grown into adulthood now. Jin, Su, and Ha, each with their father's distinctive facial markings, but with their own unique patterns as well. They performed the rituals with perfect composure, though Li thought he detected genuine grief in their movements. After the ceremony, an elderly Tellurian approached Li. The platinum insignia on his robes marked him as a council magistrate. "Captain Li Huan," he said formally. "I am Magistrate Ryu. Your presence honors us. Ambassador Kang spoke highly of you." "He was my closest friend among your people," Li replied. "I couldn't stay away." "Indeed. There is another matter we must discuss." Ryu's expression remained unreadable in the Tellurian way. The late ambassador left specific instructions to be revealed after the ceremony. "Your presence is required." Li followed Ryu to a smaller chamber where Kang's 3 daughters waited. They acknowledged him with a slight nod that was customary among their people. "Captain Li," Jin said. Her voice was deeper than Li remembered. "Father often spoke of your adventures together. He was very proud of all of you," Li replied. "I'm sorry for your loss." Magistrate Ryu activated a holographic projector. The image of Kang Dai appeared, looking just as Li remembered him. "If this recording plays, I have joined my ancestors," the hologram began. I leave this final testament with clear mind and purpose. The hologram outlined provisions for House Kang's political affairs, then continued, to my daughters, I leave all familial holdings and knowledge with one condition. As unmarried females of a high family, they require protection under our laws. Li shifted uncomfortably. Tellurian gender customs had always seemed strange to him, though Kang had explained they evolved from Telluria's harsh early history. Therefore, the hologram continued, I name Captain Li Wan of Earth as guardian to my daughters, Jin, Su, and Ha. The room fell silent. Li stared at the hologram in shock. I trust Li above all non-Tellurians. His wisdom and honor will guide my house until my daughters are established. A hologram flickered out. Magistrate Ryu turned to Li. This is unexpected, Li managed to say. Indeed, Ryu replied. And complicated. Under Tellurian law, guardianship of unmarried females from a high family carries specific requirements. Requirements? Li asked, not liking where this was heading. To prevent exploitation, the law requires the guardian to be bound to the family through marriage, Ryu stated. It is an ancient law, rarely invoked in modern times, but Ambassador Kang was traditional in family matters. Li felt his mouth go dry. Are you saying? The law states you must marry the daughters you have been assigned to protect, Ryu confirmed. Li looked at the three Tellurian women. They appeared as stunned as he felt. This can't be what Kang intended, Li protested. There must be another option. Father's wishes are clear, Jin said stiffly. But this arrangement is unexpected for us as well. I knew your father well, Li said. He respected both our cultures. He wouldn't create an impossible situation. Ha, the youngest, spoke up. The alternative is guardianship passing to House Ta. They have sought control of our genetic patents for years. Why would Kang do this? Li asked, more to himself than the others. Su, who had remained silent until now, met his eyes. Father always said humans see solutions where Tellurians see only traditions. Perhaps that is why. Magistrate Ryu cleared his throat. You have 14 planetary cycles to fulfill the requirements or reject guardianship. I will leave you to discuss this matter privately. As Ryu left, Li found himself alone with the three daughters of his oldest alien friend, all of them caught in what seemed an impossible situation. Well, Li said finally, your father always did like to create diplomatic challenges. For the first time, he saw what might have been the Tellurian equivalent of a smile flicker across Jin's face. That, she agreed, is certainly true. Li paced the guest quarters assigned to him in House Kang, unable to sleep despite his exhaustion. The 3 moons of Telluria cast shifting shadows through the high windows, 14 planetary cycles, about 20 Earth days, to decide whether to marry his friend's daughters or abandon them to their political enemies. This is madness, he muttered. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door slid open to reveal Jin, the eldest daughter, her silver skin luminous in the moonlight. Captain Li, I apologize for disturbing your rest period, she said formally. Please, just call me Li. And I wasn't resting. He gestured to a sitting area. Would you like to come in? Jin entered but remained standing. I feel I must explain our situation more clearly. I'd appreciate that. I'm still trying to understand why your father put us in this position. Father was a traditionalist in family matters, but progressive in political ones, Jin said. This created many enemies. I know about the political enemies, Li said. We dealt with assassination attempts during the peace negotiations. Jin's large eyes blinked slowly. What you may not know is that House Ta has sought control of our family's genetic heritage for generations. Genetic heritage. My sisters and I carry rare genetic markers that allow us to process certain toxic compounds. Our family has protected this trait for 12 generations. Li frowned. And House Ta wants it. The applications for interstellar colonization are significant. Jin's voice remained even, but Li noticed her hands tighten. If House Ta gains guardianship, they can legally compel genetic sampling and force advantageous marriages. That's barbaric. It is our law, Jin replied simply. Father sought to protect us the only way he could, by finding a guardian outside the reach of Tellurian politics. A second chime at the door interrupted them. Sue entered, carrying a data tablet. Jin, I've been looking for you, she said. Oh, forgive me, Captain Lee. Just Lee, please. And there's nothing to forgive. Sue glanced at her sister. Have you explained about the marriages? I was about to, Jin replied. Lee sighed. Look, I respected your father greatly, but I can't marry you. Any of you. On Earth, it would be inappropriate. You're like family to me. Sue's expression showed the subtle signs of Tellurian confusion. The marriage would be ceremonial only. We do not expect human physical intimacy. Lee felt his face flush. Oh, the law requires a guardian be bound to the family, Jin explained. It does not dictate the nature of the relationship beyond the ceremony. That's somewhat better, Lee admitted, but still problematic. Earth diplomatic courts would never approve such an arrangement. Another chime announced Ha, the youngest sister, who entered with barely contained excitement. I've been researching human customs, she said without preamble. Humans have a concept called legal fiction. When the law recognizes something that isn't factually true for practical purposes. Lee nodded. Yes, we do. Could this not be viewed as such? Hay suggested. A legal arrangement without the personal implications humans associate with marriage. Lee considered this. It's possible, but... His communication device interrupted with an urgent signal. Excuse me, he said, stepping away to answer. Park Ji's face appeared on the small screen. Captain, I've received orders from command regarding your situation. That was fast. They're unequivocal. Refuse the guardianship. The diplomatic risks are too great. They've arranged transport for you tomorrow morning. Lee frowned. That seems hasty. There's more, Park continued. Intelligence suggests House Ta may have influenced Ambassador Kang's death. If they gain control of his daughter's genetic traits, they could develop bioweapons effective against humans. What? The order comes directly from General Min. You're to return immediately. The connection ended. Lee turned back to the three sisters, who watched him with the careful neutrality Tellurians displayed in uncertain situations. Your Earth authorities have ordered you to leave, Jin stated. It wasn't a question. How did you? Tellurian hearing is more sensitive than human, Sue explained. We understand your dilemma. Lee rubbed his forehead. This is about more than cultural differences now. House Tae's involvement in Father's death? Hay asked directly. Lee stared at her. You knew. We suspected, Jin said. Father became ill very suddenly after meeting with their representatives. And now they want control of your genetic traits for potential weapons development. Lee shook his head. Your father put me in this position because he knew what was happening. If you leave, we cannot blame you, Jin said formally, though Lee detected a slight tremor in her voice. You have your own people to consider. Lee walked to the window, looking out at the alien landscape. Kang had trusted him with his most precious legacy, not just his daughters, but potentially the safety of human-Tellurian relations. Tell me about these marriages, he said finally. What exactly would they entail? The sisters exchanged glances. A ceremonial binding, Jin explained. You would be recognized as head of House Kang until we each establish our own households. No intimate obligations. Lee confirmed. None, Sue assured him. In ancient times, perhaps, but modern interpretations are more practical. And if I agree, what happens next? You would undergo the rite of introduction to our household ancestors, I said. Then the formal announcement to the High Council. House Ta would object, Jin added. They would cite your human status as disqualifying. Lee's eyes narrowed. Could they prevent it? They would try, Sue said. No human has ever led a Tellurian house. Lee was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened his shoulders. "My orders are to refuse guardianship and return to Earth," he said, "but your father was my friend. He trusted me to protect you, and I believe he knew exactly what he was doing." "You would defy your authorities?" Jin asked, surprise evident in her voice. "It wouldn't be the first time," Lee said with a small smile. "But I need to understand everything about Tellurian law if we're going to make this work." "There is much to learn," Sue cautioned. "And little time," he added. "Then we'd better get started," Lee said firmly. "I told your father once that humans are at their best when facing impossible odds. I think it's time to prove that." For the first time, Lee saw genuine expressions on all three Tellurian faces, something between hope and uncertainty. "First lesson in human customs," he said. "When we commit to protecting family, we don't back down, no matter what." The three sisters exchanged glances, and then Jin extended her hand in the human gesture Lee had taught her father years ago. "To family, then," she said as they shook hands. "To family," Lee agreed, already wondering how he would explain this to General Min. The morning light filtered through the crystalline windows of the Kang family archives as Lee and He pored over ancient texts. For 3 days, they had searched for alternatives to the marriage requirement, while Jin dealt with House Tae's increasingly aggressive inquiries, and Sue monitored communications with Earth. "I've ignored 4 direct orders to return," Lee said, rubbing his tired eyes. "My career is probably over." "Yet you remain," he observed, her silver fingers carefully turning the delicate pages of a manuscript that predated human spaceflight. "Your father wouldn't have put us in this situation without a reason." Lee stretched his stiff back. "There must be a solution he expected me to find." Ha paused, her large eyes fixed on a section of text. "Perhaps there is." Lee moved to her side. The text was in ancient Tellurian, the symbols more angular than the modern language he knew basics of. "What does it say?" "It describes the trials of guardianship, a ritual path that predates our modern marriage laws." His voice held rare excitement. "It was used when a family member sought to claim guardianship over children not of their direct line." "Like adoption?" Lee asked. "Similar in concept." He carefully translated the ancient text. "If a guardian completes 3 trials that prove their worthiness, they may claim the right of protection without marriage bonds." Lee felt a surge of hope. "That could be our answer." "What kind of trials?" His expression darkened as she continued reading. "They were designed to be impossible for any but true Tellurians to complete." "Impossible how?" "The first trial requires survival in the Mistlands for 1 full cycle of the 3rd moon. The atmosphere there is toxic to non-Tellurians." Lee frowned. "What else?" "The second trial demands solving the equation of 12 dimensions, a mathematical proof that even our greatest minds struggle with." "And the third?" "A demonstration of absolute loyalty to Tellurian values, judged by the Council of Elders." Has set down the text. "No outsider has ever attempted these trials, let alone completed them." Lee leaned back, thinking. "Your father knew about these trials?" "Almost certainly. This text comes from his private collection." "Then he believed I could pass them." Lee stood up, energized despite his exhaustion. "We need to inform Jin and prepare a formal request to attempt the trials." He looked uncertain. "The Mistlands have atmospheric conditions that will dissolve your lung tissue in minutes without protection." "Then I'll need protection," Lee said simply. 3 days later, Lee stood before the Tellurian High Council, Jin at his side as family representative. The Grand Chamber's acoustics carried every whisper from the assembled council members. "This request is unprecedented," said Elder Yun, her ancient face barely moving as she spoke. "The trials of guardianship have not been invoked in 7 generations." "And never by a human," added another elder with obvious disapproval. Jin spoke with perfect formal cadence. "The texts make no specification that the guardian must be Tellurian, only that they must prove worthy through the trials." Murmurs filled the chamber until Magistrate Ryu raised his hand for silence. Captain Lee Wan, You understand that failure in any trial means forfeiture of all guardianship claims. House Ta has already filed their secondary claim. I understand, Li replied. Very well. Ryu's expression remained neutral. The council approves your request. The first trial will commence at tomorrow's dawn. As they left the chamber, a tall figure blocked their path. Ta Bak, head of House Ta, flanked by two advisors. A creative attempt, human, Bak said, his silver face showing the slight crease of amusement. But the mist lands will dissolve your breathing apparatus within hours. Your protection of Kang's daughters will end before it begins. We'll see, Li replied evenly. Back at House Kang, Su met them with disturbing news. Earth Command has frozen your accounts and revoked your diplomatic status, she reported. They claim you've gone rogue. Li grimaced. That complicates things. How will you survive the Mistlands without proper equipment? Jin asked. I'll manage, Li said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. They entered, carrying the container. I may have a solution. Father maintained many connections with other species. She opened the container to reveal a strange translucent device. This is Exoraxian cellular modifier. A what? The Exoraxians evolved in an environment similar to our Mistlands. This temporarily alters cellular structure to resist corrosive atmospheres. Li examined the device warily. Has it been tested on humans? No, He admitted. But my calculations suggest it should work for approximately 26 hours, enough to complete the trial if you're efficient. And if your calculations are wrong? I hesitated. Then your cellular structure will fail to revert properly. Meaning? Your body would dissolve from within. Li swallowed hard. Well, no pressure then. The Mistlands stretched before Li like a nightmare landscape. Purplish fog swirled across acidic pools, while jagged rock formations created an eerie maze. The modified atmospheric suit he wore felt strange against his skin, the Xaraxian device pulsing with odd energy at his chest. The trial is simple, explained the Tellurian guide. Reach the far marker before the third moon completes 1/4 of its cycle. The path is not marked. How will you monitor my progress? Li asked. We won't. Either you emerge at the marker, or you don't. With those encouraging words, the guide departed in his shielded transport. Li took a deep breath and activated the Xaraxian device. A strange sensation flooded through him as his cells began to modify. His skin tingled painfully, and his vision blurred, then cleared with enhanced perception. Here goes nothing, he muttered, stepping into the mists. The acid fog immediately began eating through his outer suit, but his modified skin resisted the corrosion. The strange feeling of the mist touching him without burning was disorienting. 4 hours in, Li discovered why traditional routes failed. The landscape shifted, rearranging itself in subtle ways that led travelers in circles. Standard Tellurian navigation relied on magnetic fields that seemed to distort here. Think differently, Li told himself, remembering Kang's favorite advice. Instead of fighting the shifting terrain, Li observed its patterns. The movements weren't random but cyclical, like tides responding to the 3 moons. Where Tellurians would see chaos, Li recognized a system. He began moving with the shifts rather than against them, timing his progress to the rhythmic changes. The mists became not an obstacle but a guide, their currents showing the true path forward. 23 hours later, as the Xaraxian device began to pulse erratically, Li stumbled out of the mists at the marker stone. The Tellurian observers waiting there stared in shock. Impossible, one whispered. Li collapsed as the device powered down, his body convulsing as cells reverted to normal. Through the pain, he managed a weak smile. 1 trial down, he gasped. 2 to go. Back at House Kang, as he recovered, Jin informed him that news of his success had spread throughout the capital. No one believed you would survive, she said, genuine amazement in her voice. Your father once told me that humans see patterns differently than Tellurians, Li replied. He said it was our greatest strength, and our greatest weakness. And the equation of 12 dimensions. Sue asked, "How will you solve what our mathematicians cannot?" Lee smiled tiredly. "The same way, by not thinking like a Tellurian." For the first time, he felt he understood what Kang had intended. These trials weren't just about proving himself worthy. They were about showing both species what they could learn from each other. Lee's successful completion of the second trial had shocked the Tellurian mathematical community. Using human game theory, he had approached the equation of 12 dimensions from an entirely different angle. Where Tellurian mathematicians saw a problem of absolute variables, Lee had applied principles of probability and chaos theory, achieving not a perfect solution, but one that worked within acceptable parameters. "Your approach was unorthodox," admitted Elder Yun during the verification ceremony. "Sometimes the perfect answer isn't as useful as a good enough answer," Lee had replied. Now, with 2 trials complete, Lee had earned a level of respect from the Tellurian High Council. House Tay's objections grew more desperate, and security around House Kang had been increased. Lee sat in the family study with Sue, reviewing the requirements for the final trial, the test of loyalty. "The descriptions are deliberately vague," Sue explained, frustration evident in her voice. "The trial changes for each participant, designed to test their specific character." "That's not very helpful for preparation," Lee sighed. "The trial begins tomorrow at sunrise. You have tonight to prepare however you can." A soft chime interrupted them. Hay entered, her normally composed face showing signs of agitation. "I need to speak with you both," she said, closing the door and checking for listening devices, a precaution that had become routine since Lee's arrival. "What's wrong?" Lee asked. "I've been analyzing Father's personal files," Hay explained. "The encryption was complex, but I finally accessed his private medical data." She activated a holographic display showing cellular scans and chemical analyses. "These are from Father's last medical examination, 3 days before his death," Hay explained. "This compound," she highlighted a molecular structure, "is not naturally occurring in Tellurians." "Poison?" Lee asked, though he already knew the answer. "A sophisticated one," Hay confirmed. "It mimics natural cellular breakdown, but accelerates it exponentially. It would appear as sudden organ failure to standard medical scans." Sue's silver skin paled. "You have proof of murder." "Not definitive proof of who administered it," Hay replied. "But the compound's signature matches experimental research from House Ta's chemical division." Lee studied the data. "Your father suspected this might happen. It's why he named me Guardian. He knew I would be beyond House Ta's immediate reach." "Why didn't he alert authorities if he suspected danger?" Sue asked. "Without proof, accusations against a high house would damage his reputation and potentially expose you 3 to greater danger," Lee reasoned. "Instead, he created this contingency plan." I nodded. "That matches Father's strategic thinking." "We need to bring this evidence to the High Council," Lee said. "Not yet," Sue cautioned. "House Ta has supporters on the council. If they learn we have this evidence before we can present it properly, they'll move against us directly," Lee finished. "You're right. We need to secure this information and gather more evidence." The door chimed again. Jin entered, her face grave. "House Ta has requested a formal meeting before tomorrow's trial," she announced. "Ta Bak wishes to speak with you personally, Lee." "That's unexpected." "And suspicious," Hay added. "I agree, but refusing would appear disrespectful to the council," Jin said. "The meeting is set for tonight at the neutral ground of the Memorial Gardens." Lee considered the implications. This could be an opportunity to learn more about their plans. "Or a trap," Sue warned. "Either way, I should go," Lee decided. "But we'll take precautions." The Memorial Gardens were beautiful at night, illuminated by bioluminescent plants that cast a soft blue glow over the walking paths. Lee arrived early, accompanied by Jin as family representative. "Remember, Tellurian vocal patterns reveal more than their faces," Jin advised quietly. Listen for rhythm changes when Bax speaks. Got it. Lee nodded. And has recording device. Jin touched her ceremonial collar, where a tiny device was hidden. Active and transmitting to House Kang's secure server. Tyback approached with 2 attendants, his tall frame imposing even among Tellurians. His silver skin had the subtle patterning of advanced age, though not as pronounced as the council elders. Captain Lee, Bax said with formal politeness, your persistence is remarkable. Thank you for requesting this meeting, Lee replied with equal formality. Bax gestured to a private seating area. Shall we speak without our attendants? Some matters are best discussed directly. Jin looked concerned, but Lee nodded. I agree. Once seated away from others, Bax's demeanor shifted subtly. Your attempt at the trials has been impressive, he began. No one expected a human to survive the Mistlands, let alone solve the equation. Yet here we are, Lee said. Indeed, it demonstrates why Ambassador Kang valued your species. Bax's fingers tapped a casual rhythm on the stone bench. I wish to offer an alternative arrangement before your final trial. I'm listening. The genetic heritage of House Kang is valuable to all Tellurians, not merely one house. I propose a cooperative research agreement. House Ta would withdraw its guardianship claim, and you would return to Earth with full diplomatic honors restored. Lee kept his expression neutral. And the daughters of House Kang. They would maintain nominal independence under a joint research council. Bax's voice shifted pitch slightly. Their genetic material would be studied ethically, for the benefit of all Tellurians. That sounds reasonable on the surface, Lee replied carefully. Why wasn't this proposed earlier? Politics requires timing, Bax said. Your success in the trials has created an opportunity for compromise. Lee noticed the rhythm change Jin had mentioned, a subtle indication of deception. I would need to discuss this with Jin, Su, and Ha, Lee said, and review the specific terms. Of course, but I would appreciate an answer before tomorrow's trial. Bax stood. Consider carefully, Captain. Even if you pass the final trial, humans and Tellurians remain fundamentally different. Your guardianship would face constant challenges. After Bax departed, Jin rejoined Lee. You heard. Lee asked quietly. Everything, Jin confirmed. His offer is a deception. I know, but why make it at all? Why not just let me attempt the final trial? Because they fear you might succeed, Jin realized. And they know something about the trial that we don't. Back at House Kang, He connected her device to the main system. I've analyzed Bax's vocal patterns, she reported. Multiple deception indicators throughout, but particularly when mentioning the Research Council. What else did you find, Lee asked, noticing her troubled expression. I accessed Father's final personal logs, she said quietly. He knew he was being poisoned but continued meeting with House Ta to gather evidence. He sacrificed himself to protect you, Lee said softly. Ah nodded. And there's more. The final trial, he left specific notes about it. The test of loyalty isn't what we thought. What do you mean? The test will force you to choose between Tellurian values and human values, Hitt explained. It's designed to be impossible for an outsider because it requires betraying your own species' core principles. Lee felt a chill, and House Ta knows this. They're counting on it, Sue added. Either you fail the trial, or you betray human values and lose credibility with your own people. A perfect trap, Jin said grimly. Lee was quiet for a moment, then looked at each sister in turn. Your father believed I could find a way through this, and I still believe that too. But first, we need to expose what happened to him. If House Todd murdered an ambassador, that changes everything. The evidence is circumstantial, I cautioned. We need more proof to bring before the council. Then let's get it, Lee said firmly. Tonight, as the 3 moons of Telluria rose higher, Lee and the sisters developed a plan that would either save House Kang or destroy what remained of it. Tomorrow's trial would be more than a test of loyalty. It would be a reckoning. The grand chamber of the Tellurian High Council glowed with ceremonial lights as Li faced the assembled elders. The final trial, the test of loyalty, was about to begin. After a night of careful planning with the Kang sisters, he felt prepared, though uncertainty still gnawed at him. Elder Yun rose from her seat at the center of the semicircular platform. Captain Li Huan, you have completed 2 trials that no non-Tellurian has ever accomplished. The final trial will test your loyalty to Tellurian values and principles. Li bowed respectfully. I am ready. The test is simple, Elder Yun continued. House Ta has submitted evidence that human authorities have designated you a rogue agent. They claim your continued presence on Telluria violates the terms of our treaty with Earth. Tieback stood from his observer's seat, his expression showing the subtle signs of Tellurian satisfaction. You must choose, Elder Yun said. Return to Earth immediately to face your authorities, honoring the treaty between our worlds, or continue your claim as guardian, breaking your loyalty to your own people. The trap was exactly as He had predicted. Either Li abandoned the Kang sisters, or he defied Earth authorities and violated the treaty, proving himself disloyal to human principles. Li took a deep breath. Honored elders, before I respond, I request the right to present evidence in a matter directly related to this guardianship. Murmurs spread through the chamber. This was not the expected response. Elder Yun frowned. This is irregular, but permitted. Thank you. Li activated a small holographic projector. Last night, with the help of Ambassador Kang's daughters, I discovered evidence that the ambassador did not die of natural causes. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Tabak rose to his feet. This is outrageous. A desperate attempt to... Silence, commanded Magistrate Ryu. Captain Li, these are serious allegations. Yes, they are. Li proceeded to display his analysis of the poison found in Kang's medical scans, along with the connection to House Ta's Chemical Research Division. This is circumstantial evidence, Bak protested. Nothing directly links House Ta to any wrongdoing. I agree, Li said calmly, which is why we obtained more definitive proof. He nodded to Jin, who stepped forward with a small data crystal. With the Council's permission, I submit my father's final personal logs, including conversations recorded with Tabak in the days before his death. As the recordings played, Bak's face lost its composed expression. The logs clearly showed him threatening Ambassador Kang over the genetic research, followed by Kang's private entries documenting his growing illness after meetings with House Tai representatives. Additionally, Li continued, I submit this recording from last night's meeting with Tabak. A holographic display showed Bak offering Li the compromise, but with enhanced audio analysis highlighting the deception markers in his voice patterns. The council chamber had gone deadly silent. Honored elders, Li said, Ambassador Kang knew he was being poisoned. He named me guardian because he knew I would be beyond House Ta's immediate influence. He anticipated this moment, including this final trial. Elder Yun's ancient face showed rare emotion. You accuse a high house of murder. If proven false, the penalty would be severe. I understand, Li replied, but there is one final piece of evidence. He gestured to Ha, who approached with a small container. This contains a sample of the poison found in my father's system. The molecular structure matches compounds only produced in House Ta's laboratories. Magistrate Ryu ordered immediate analysis, while security personnel surrounded Tabak and his associates. Li turned back to the council. Now, to address the trial itself. You asked me to choose between loyalty to Earth and loyalty to my guardianship claim. I choose neither, and both. Confusion crossed several elder faces. Ambassador Kang taught me that true loyalty isn't about blind obedience to rules, but about upholding the principles behind those rules. The treaty between Earth and Telluria was created to foster peace and cooperation. By exposing the conspiracy that threatened both our peoples, I've honored that treaty's true purpose. Li straightened his shoulders. I request that the Council contact Earth authorities directly to explain the situation. I believe when they understand the full circumstances, they will recognize my actions as consistent with human values of justice and protection of the innocent. A long silence followed. Finally, Elder Yun spoke. In my 342 cycles, I have never witnessed such an unexpected resolution to the test of loyalty. She conferred briefly with the other elders before continuing. The trial does not specify how loyalty must be demonstrated, only that it must be proven genuine. By refusing to choose between your worlds and instead finding a path that honors both, you have shown a deeper understanding of loyalty than many Tellurians achieve. The council chamber remained tense as they awaited the results of the poison analysis. When they came, there was no doubt. The compound matched those exclusive to House Ta's laboratories. As Ta Bak was taken into custody, Elder Yun faced Li again. Captain Li Huan, you have completed the trials of guardianship. The council recognizes your right to adopt the daughters of House Kang without marriage bonds. Furthermore, we will communicate directly with Earth authorities regarding these events. 3 days later, Li stood in the ceremonial hall of House Kang. The adoption ceremony was simple but profound. Jin, Su, and Han knelt before him, offering the traditional cups of Tellurian spring water. Li drank from each, then placed his hands on their shoulders, reciting the ancient words of family acceptance that He had taught him. With this water, I accept responsibility for your well-being and honor. With these hands, I offer protection and guidance. With my voice, I speak your names as my family. The witnesses from the High Council nodded in approval. The ceremony concluded with each daughter placing a band of woven silver around Li's wrist, symbols of their new family bond. Later, in the private family chamber, Jin approached Li with a small crystalline cube. "Father left this for you," she said. "It was to be given only if you completed the trials." Li activated the cube. A hologram of Ambassador Kang appeared, his silver face showing the subtle Tellurian expression of pride. "Li, my friend," the recording began. "If you're seeing this, you've accomplished what I knew only you could do. You've protected my daughters and likely uncovered the truth of my demise." Kang's holographic form smiled. "I did not place this burden on you lightly. I knew that only a human, specifically you, would approach these challenges differently enough to succeed. Where Tellurians see only tradition, humans see possibility." The hologram gestured expansively. "What you've created is more valuable than you yet realize. This new family, human and Tellurian together, represents the future I always envisioned for our peoples. Not just cooperation, but true understanding." Li felt a lump in his throat as Kang continued. "House Kang will flourish under your guidance, and my daughters will teach you our ways as you teach them yours. Jin's diplomatic skills, Su's scientific mind, and has brilliant innovation, combined with your human perspective, will create something extraordinary." The message concluded with Kang's traditional farewell. "Until the 3 moons align again, my friend." As the hologram faded, Li looked at the 3 Tellurian women who were now his family by law. Different species, different worlds, different perspectives, yet united by common purpose. "Your father was right," Li said softly. "This isn't just about protecting you or honoring his memory. It's about building something new between our worlds." Jin nodded. "The High Council has already requested our presence at the next diplomatic summit with Earth, and my research division has received inquiries about joint projects." Su added. He smiled in the subtle Tellurian way. "Father would be pleased." Outside the windows of House Kang, the 3 moons of Telluria hung in perfect alignment, a rare occurrence that happened only once every 60 cycles. The new family stood together, watching the silver light illuminate both their past and their future.